One of the most popular images, I would say, found within the Bible is that of a shepherd. Now, it's been a fixture since the book of Genesis, way back in the very beginning, where we have this fellow named Abraham who leaves Ur of the Chaldees with his flocks and his herds, and he wanders around and ends up down. God decides he will give him. Well, I'm going to change a little bit. We'll stand. So, and God makes this promise to him that he's going to give him this land flowing with milk and honey, and it will belong to his the generations after him. His son Isaac also becomes a shepherd, as does Jacob. And then, of course, the story of Israel as they go down into Egypt and they end up becoming enslaved. And 300 years later, a shepherd named Moses delivers the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. So it's this kind of mythological character almost, part of what we would call Jewish folklore or cultural identity, this notion of the shepherd. It would come to a head in the Old Testament in the shepherd king of David, one who would move from the fields to the royal palace. And he would pen the immortal words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need." Now, even in the New Testament, Luke's gospel account, it is a humble group of shepherds who get the royal announcements of Jesus' birth. Not kings in their palaces or upper class people, but humble shepherds. Now, here's the thing. Nothing would strike fear in the heart of a kid in a Sunday school class more than the word Bible drill, than the word Christmas pageant. Any little boy growing up, because about every other year, our church we didn't have to do it every year, but every so often, we would feel the need around the Christmas season to reenact the birth of Jesus. And we had a lot of boys, didn't have many girls. So you would sweat bullets because there were parts that you did not want. Nobody wanted to be Joseph. I mean, you would have to sit next to the icky girl. Nobody wanted that part. Nobody wanted to be the angel because he had a lot of words to say, and let's face it, he's a little girly. Now, the best part to get was shepherd number 2. Shepherd number 2. You didn't want to be shepherd number 1. Because the great thing about shepherd number 2 is you still got to dress up, you got to carry the stick, but your only line happened after the shepherd number 1 interacts with the angel, and he turns to you and you say, "Yes, we should go to Bethlehem and see this baby." Drop the mic, you're done. Best part ever, shepherd number 2 in the Christmas pageant. Alas, I was never given the part of shepherd number 2. I have no idea why. Maybe I talked all the time, I don't know. But I never got the non-speaking part. So I digress. But anyway, this image of the shepherd had a certain mythos already attached to it by the time of Jesus. And it was firmly embedded in the cultural consciousness of the Jewish people whenever Jesus chooses to use the metaphor to describe himself, which we're going to read about here in a minute. His audience already kind of has this working understanding of the word. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. I am the good shepherd. Now remember that this image that we're talking about right now is the third metaphor found within a really short span of time. So 3 weeks ago, we kind of started this whole discourse whenever Jesus heals the blind man. And he makes the statement, I am the light. And then 2 weeks ago, this is all still part of this same kind of discourse. He heals the blind man, and then they're questioning why he heals the blind man. And so then he starts telling the story about who he is. And 2 weeks ago, he begins with the analogy of the sheep pen and says, I am the gate by which people go in and go out. And here, just the next 2 verses after that, we introduce this third metaphor. It's all part of this same discourse. I am the good shepherd. Now, I want you to keep in mind as we kind of discuss this, all that I talked about before I read this passage. Shepherds figure prominently in the cultural image of Jewishness at the time. If you were listening to Jesus deliver this statement, you couldn't help but draw parallels between what Jesus is saying about himself here and what David says about God in Psalm 23. But notice what Jesus does here, though. While David says, the Lord is my shepherd, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Jesus is directly comparing himself to God, which would probably cause his audience a little bit of confusion and make them a little uncomfortable. And his audience would take notice of this, that he's drawing this parallel. But the bigger question for me, why a shepherd? I mean, we play this game a lot where if Marcus were God and I'd come here on earth, the comparison I wouldn't draw between me and the common man would be that of a shepherd. I mean, if that would be one of the last comparisons I would make about myself. If Jesus really wanted to fill the image of Messiah in the line of David, why not use the metaphor of a good king? After all, that's where all this is going, right? Jesus is supposed to be the Messiah. He's supposed to restore the monarchy. Why not just come out and say, I am the good king? But like everything else with Jesus, it comes down to this upside-down notion of the kingdom of heaven, where the first is last and the last is first. And if you want to save your life, you've got to be willing to lay it down. Jesus essentially says, I am going to play this part of Messiah and fulfill the prophecy, but I'm going to do it on my own terms, not yours. This life and mission that I am on is about sacrifice, not power. We would do well to remember that. You see, for the shepherd, his life revolves around the care of his flock. So much so that he's willing to lay his life down for it. I don't know about you, but that seems a bit excessive, doesn't it? Lay your life down for a bunch of sheep. I mean, I grew up on a farm. And let me tell you, livestock does not impress me. I grew up on a farm, and I don't own animals. There's a reason why I do not have livestock right now. See, for one thing, when we domesticated animals all those thousands of years ago, we instituted selective breeding for certain traits. Intelligence wasn't one of them. In fact, you don't want livestock too smart. They could get out of things. So they're not the sharpest sticks in a pile, these animals that we've domesticated in this world. They have to be protected from predators, and sometimes even from themselves. They get themselves hung up in briar patches or can't find the pond or any other things that seem to happen to these animals. Sheep especially are prone to wandering off the sides of cliffs. So you have to protect these animals even from themselves. They're not very bright. And there's another problem. They stink. They smell awful all the time. All they do is eat and poop. That's how I sum up the first 18 years of my life, taking care of eating and pooping machines. That's all they did. I'm sorry, but I would not lay down my life for an animal like that. If something comes between me and the cow, I'm like, it's going to get the cow. Sorry. Not it. Not it. So the occupation of the shepherd is to take care of these creatures who can barely help themselves on a good day. Not only that laying down his life for them, because the reason he did is because they were his livelihood. See, for subsistence farmers, and heck, even in the first century, and even now in the 21st century, if you're a subsistence farmer in Africa or somewhere like that, your animals are precious because they're all you have. Your entire fortune and livelihood are tied up in these really dumb creatures that smell bad. But that's what you've staked your fortune on. If you lost it, then you starved. So the image we have of a shepherd laying down his life for his flock was an image that this audience understood all too well. They had to be protected and guarded with your life. Now Jesus, he isn't just any old shepherd. He's a good shepherd. Now I have made no secret, I am not an animal person. I have 2 cats, 3 chickens, and 3 rabbits at my house. I tolerate their existence for my children. When I look down the road in my future, when my kids are outside of the house, there are no animals in this future of mine. None. Right now, just for the kids. When I lived on a farm, the animals were a means to an end. We didn't baby them, we didn't coddle them, we didn't name them. They all had numbers. In fact, when my wife started coming to the farm with me, she was mortified that the animals did not have names. I'm like, well, we milk them, and sometimes we may have to eat them, so they don't, They were a means to an end. I don't consider myself cruel, but I would not deny the fact that there have been times when a cow was doing something stupid and I didn't go after it with a stick across the forehead. I'm not going to deny that. But there are those people in the world who really get animals. And I respect them. I don't understand them, but I respect them. The dog whisperers, the horse whisperers, those guys that get goats to surf. Those are animal people. I'm like, that would seem like a royal waste of my time trying to get a goat to surf. But you should YouTube this guy. He's really funny. They're good with animals. And so this is the image we have of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd puts his life on the line for his flock. He isn't just some hired hand who has no ownership on it, but the one who has put in blood, sweat, and tears protecting this bunch of stupid, smelly sheep who may or may not even acknowledge the work that he's doing. As we move into this Holy Week, where we're looking forward to Easter, those are powerful words. I lay down my life for my sheep. This is the power of a shepherd over a king. You see, a king would never lay down his life for his subjects. In fact, quite the opposite. A king always demands that his subjects protect him. They must be the ones who lay down their lives. They must be the ones who pledge allegiance and fealty. They are the ones who die in a war while the king or Congress sits back and sacrifices nothing. This image of kingship is oftentimes built on fear, intimidation, and let's face it, not a little bit of psychological manipulation. But that is not the image that Jesus chooses to reveal of himself. While he is a king, while he is in the line of David, while he is still the very real presence of God to us, he makes no demands of us. Rather, he is the one who lays down his life for us and then invites us into that way. You see, that is the real power of this kingdom. Not nationalistic propaganda or fear, but genuine love. I am the Good Shepherd. Of course, you know what that means, right? If he is the shepherd, then I am the sheep. So what I said about dumb farm animals may offend you. But if it does, then you probably need to do some real serious soul searching. I readily admit that most days I fit the mold of a sheep quite nicely. I'm dirty, smelly, and a tad bit narcissistic. I need protection from the outside, and let's face it, from even myself. I need to be led by someone who knows where they are going. In verse 14, we find the second big idea of this metaphor. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I have discovered in my short time on this planet that all anyone in this world ever really wants is to be loved. Not in all the shallow and stupid, selfish ways we define love as human beings, but rather we want to completely know someone and they know us, with all our faults and failures, and they love us anyway. 'Tis a rare thing, this love. Most people spend their lives either looking for it or running from it, because at the same time it may be desirable, it's also terrifying. Here Jesus says this about his relationship with his sheep. I know them and they know me. In the same way that I know the Father and the Father knows me. Now, to be clear, this isn't saying that we know everything about Jesus. Rather, it seeks to convey more a relational standing than just strictly knowledge. It is like knowing a spouse or knowing your own child. While you know a lot of information about them, you don't know everything. But you do know who they are on a deeper level than just your colleagues at work. This relationship we have with this good shepherd is exactly like the relationship he has with God the Father. That is a powerful statement. That is why I follow this Jesus. I want to know and I want to be known by him. I want to be with the one, though he is greater than me, he lays down his life for me. This understanding of Jesus brings so much more power to the words of Psalm 23 when we read them. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me along the right paths, sometimes even if I don't want to go, for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of death itself, I will fear nothing that is evil, for he is with me. His rod and his staff bring me comfort and give me guidance. He prepares a table for me in the very presence of those who would do me harm, my enemies. He gives me good things to the point where I am overflowed with blessing. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for all of my days. As we stand and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I love you so much, and I thank you for this day and this chance to be here with this people. And God, my prayer, dig a little deeper within these metaphors, these statements that were made by you. We would seek to develop that understanding, God. Not necessarily more knowledge about you, but to understand what it means to really live in that relationship with you, God. To understand what it means that you know us in the same way that you know the Father. And that should bring us a lot of comfort. Be with us as we go about this week, as we look forward to celebrating Easter and what it means to live a life following you, both towards the cross, a life of sacrifice, but also what it means to live in the resurrection, to be one who is free from death. We thank you for everything you've given us. Amen. Stay standing.